Hello and welcome to Introduction to Web Design. I'm your instructor, Cameron Buckley, and this course is really about how the internet works and how we make content for the web. So I'm just going to quickly go over how our course is laid out and how it's going to work. But essentially, this front page, you can just read the course description. So Intro to Web Design serves as an introduction to the concepts of dynamic web design such as layout and accessibility, as well as an introduction to the basics of HTML. So if we move over to our syllabus, you should be able to see the course breakdown, and I'm going to let you read most of this on your own, but I just want to go over a couple key things. So our course objectives, you're going to design and prototype a basic website using HTML and CSS and some software called Adobe Xd. I'm going to get into what all three of these mean in just a little bit. Then you're going to explain how the internet functions at a basic end user level. And finally, you're going to be able to identify the guiding principles for effective and communicative contemporary web design. So I'm really going to be focusing not so much on programming or being a great web developer, but this is much more of a web designer course. Keep that in mind because basically that means that you're not going to learn a ton of code, all right, which might be a positive for you. That also might be a negative for you. There's a course that follows this course called Front-End Web Development, where we really will dive deeper into HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery, and some other different languages and really talk about how to be more of an actual developer for the web. In this case, we're going to be basically prototyping, looking at color schemes, looking at interaction design, UX, how we're thinking about how a user or another person interacts with the internet. Okay? So this is really a web design course, not a web development course. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Basically, for our grading, we have 3 quizzes, so they're 5% each. So some weeks you'll have quizzes. This first week you'll have a quiz, for example. Some weeks you'll have assignments. Those are 10% of your grade each. Those will require you to do a little bit something extra, like actually making a website or making some content. You'll have 7 discussion board responses, so 1 per week. Each one is 3% of your grade for a total of 21%. Be sure to participate in those. It's really helpful to engage with your fellow classmates. And then you have 1 final project that's worth quite a bit of your grade, 34% of your total grade. And that final project, just so that you can be sort of mentally prepared, is essentially designing and building a website. So we have some course policies. You can read through those. A few course readiness information that I want to cover. You're going to need to go download Atom, which you can click here and it'll open up atom.io. And Atom is on just about every operating system. Doesn't matter if you're on Mac, doesn't matter if you're on Windows, Linux, whatever, you can run Atom. Atom is basically just a fancy text editor. We're going to use it a little bit in this class, not too much. For our next class, though, for front-end web development, if you go on to take that course, you'll be using Atom every day. You're going to need the Creative Cloud Suite. Just like in the other courses that you've taken so far in this program, you're going to need access to Photoshop, Illustrator, and most importantly, Adobe Xd. Just briefly, Adobe Xd, I'm going to open it up real quick, is prototyping software that you use to build really simple kind of mock-ups of a website or an application. You're going to need a GitHub account. GitHub is this kind of, it's actually kind of a complicated system, but essentially we're going to use it to host our websites. All right, so GitHub will let you host a website for free, and I'll be able to access it, and the rest of the world will be able to access it. And lastly, you're going to need a working digital backup system, which that's just par for the course. You're going to need either a cloud-based system or a physical system. I just want to make sure you have everything backed up. So technical skills, these are all pretty basic, but one important thing is you really need to know how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, and I'm including InDesign in this because I'm assuming that you've taken design technology at this point. If you haven't taken design technology, that's fine. It's not the end of the world, but I would really like you to be concurrently enrolled in that while you're in this class. Knowing how to use those pieces of software can be extremely helpful. Lastly, I just want to go over our schedule. So every week, Friday 8 a.m., the course unlocks the next module, and at Friday 8 a.m., the students finish and turn in the content from the previous module. So our modules are this. Basically, I'm just going to kind of break them down. So we're going to go over what is the internet first. This is sort of our introductory module where we're going to talk about some of the basics of terms and things involved in web design, but also in how we talk about the internet and what a DNS is and what and IP addresses and all these different things that you may not be familiar with. The internet just kind of works whenever we use it. But it's important to know how all this back-end stuff happens so that if there's a problem, you can actually fix it. Then we're going to talk about some design principles in wireframes. So this is whenever we're going to get into Adobe Xd and start really using it and creating some awesome content. Then we're going to touch a little bit of code, just a little bit, for HTML and CSS introduction. I just want you to know how HTML and CSS function, not necessarily be fluent in those languages. Then we're going to move on to talking about what UX is, which stands for user experience, and flow, this concept of how we flow from one page to another page and one piece of content to another piece of content. So this is really our week where we're going to be talking about interaction design more than visual design. Module 5, we're actually going to talk about getting our content onto the internet. You're going to learn how to use FTP, which is a file transfer protocol. It's basically used to upload your content onto a web server so that it's publicly accessible. Then you're going to learn responsive design. Responsive design is a fancy term for how a web page changes whenever you're on a phone, or whenever you're on a tablet, or whenever you're on a monitor that's not super huge. For example, if I change this, right, if I start moving this around, we're going to see some responsive design as the page kind of crushes in and out. Then you have a final project week, and that week's just a work week to complete your final project. So office hours for this class, my plan right now is Fridays, 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. I'm going to try to have them not necessarily every week, probably every other week, but if you need them, certainly feel free to contact me. If you're struggling with something, shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to make a video over it. Most of the content in this class are kind of like lectures and readings and stuff like that, but you will be able to there is quite a bit of doing in the class as well, making and watching demonstrations of like me using software. So you're going to have an interesting mix of like both quizzes and assignments. Just keep that in mind that some weeks you may not be making all that much. You may be kind of reading and thinking and writing, and then other weeks you're going to be making a ton.